Hey guys, we took our show on the road today and we're sitting here with Patrick Bennett of Mason Bennett Johncox to discuss what's going on in the world of real estate law with this transitional market. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Glad to be here.
Thank you. Okay, so Patrick, what is going on? What are you running into most often with this transitional market?
I would say sort of two things that I'm seeing happening a lot these days, and it's really only been in the last couple of months. First of all, if we are acting for the sellers of a property, we're getting phone calls from the lawyer for the buyers saying that their appraisal came back for a value less than the buyers bought the property for. Our seller sold the property for, and there's an issue with buyers getting financing. So that either necessitates the buyers coming up with alternative means of financing, coming up with more money from their own pocket or from other lenders, perhaps a second mortgage. Or in one case that we had, we were asked if our sellers would take a price reduction in order to get the deal closed. So that's certainly one thing that we have been seeing in this last little bit. The other thing that I've also been seeing is situations where, again, people are buying from our seller clients, and the people that are buying from us in turn have to sell their property, but they bought first and haven't sold, and they bought maybe say in February when the market was a little more robust, and now they're trying to sell and it had a long closing date for their purchase. Now they're trying to sell their property and prices have reduced, and as a result they are not getting what they thought they would get for their sale, so they're having trouble selling the property and getting the money that they want out of it.
Yeah, that can pose a lot of problems. We're definitely seeing that on our end as well. Properties that maybe were taking a little bit of time to get prepared for market and then listing maybe a month after they purchased firm and are now trying to sell. And that can pose risks for financing as well, because realistically they were purchasing based on a projected sale price of their property, and now they're not getting it. So we're definitely seeing that. Have you seen any not close?
Knock on wood, I have not seen any not close yet, but I've had this week 4 deals that have wobbled and are wobbling, 2 of which we think we've got back on the rails, a third one which I also think we've got back on the rails, another one we'll deal with next week. So far it's been okay. But it certainly adds a lot of stress to the process, especially compared to the last 2 years when things just went wham bam and it was done.
And that's why it pays to have a professional on your side putting these deals back together for your seller clients. So that's really great. Another thing I wanted to talk to you about was the buyer's perception that they can, after the market shifted and properties were not valued as high as they were when they purchased, that they can just walk away from the deal, and that the only risk to them would be to lose their initial deposit on the property. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. So generally speaking, in an agreement of purchase and sale, a deposit is meant to show how committed, if you will, a buyer is to the agreement. So if there's a very small deposit, it's obviously the thinking is they're not as committed, because if they didn't go ahead, they could walk away, which, as I'll talk to in a few minutes, is not entirely the case. Obviously, the more money is down, the more money they are leaving on the table. So generally speaking, buyers want to put as little a deposit down as possible. Sellers will want as big a deposit as possible. And that's the negotiation, the tension. And if you're acting for a seller, obviously you want someone like you that's negotiating well to get a big deposit.
We definitely want to see that they have some skin in the game. So we're looking for a minimum of 5% deposit for sure, and especially in a transitional market.
Absolutely. So that's just sort of a little bit of background. So yes, I've also heard, and I've had calls saying, we don't think we can go ahead with this deal. Let's just forgo the deposit and it's over. And I have to tell buyer clients,
That's not the case.
No, the deposit is the start of possible damages. So coming up with this on the top of my head, so bear with me. If there is a $50,000 deposit, as an example, and the buyers can't or won't or are unwilling to close, that the best case scenario is that they would lose that $50,000. But that's an absolute best case scenario, meaning that if the buyer says to a seller, we are not going to close, the seller then has to mitigate their damages by relisting, reselling the property.
And as we know right now, if you're relisting and you initially sold in February and are relisting now, that could be, a difference of almost $200,000 on some properties.
Correct. So let's go through two different scenarios. Let's say, I know it's probably not going to happen, but let's say the seller relists, resells for exactly the same price as buyer one bought it for.
Which is the best case scenario.
Which is best case scenario. Or even let's say they sell it for more. I know that's unlikely to happen in this market, but let's just for example purposes, in that situation, if the sellers resold for $100,000 more than the first transaction, then the buyer number one would lose the $50,000 deposit. That's it.
Even if they sold for more.
Even if they sold for more.
Okay.
Courts again and again and again have held that as long as the a deposit was sort of a genuine pre-estimate of damages, it wasn't like 90% of the purchase price, that deposit is gone. But again, that's the best case scenario. So let's flip that around and say,
run through the worst.
Right. So let's say the the sellers relist, resell, do their best efforts to get the best possible price, and let's say they sell it for $100,000 less. Mm-hmm. So at that point, the sellers would say, our losses are as follows: $100,000 reduction in the purchase price, real estate commission if there were additional real estate fees for that, legal fees, other costs and expenses as a result of the delay between the first closing with the buyers and the second closing. So whatever those total up to, let's say they total up to $125,000. In that situation, the sellers would go after the buyer number one for that $50,000 deposit plus another $75,000 for the additional costs.
And that's not even including if that particular seller was purchasing something else, and now domino effect has held up the sale or the closing of the property that they purchased. In that instance, would the initial buyer be on the hook for the damages of the new property as well?
Yep, it all flows downhill. Oof. As plumbers say, it all flows downhill.
Right. So that's very important to note. It's not just that you're going to be at risk of losing your initial deposit and then go out and purchase something else. You really are on the hook for quite possibly a substantial amount of money.
Yeah, and this is probably a topic for another day, but it's at some point we could talk about bridge financing and why that's a good thing. Because when you are on days where you have chains of people selling, buying, you've got a whole bunch of deals that if somebody up the chain,
on just the one,
not just the one, everything up there affects. And if there's 5 deals and deal number 1 doesn't close, everything up the chain doesn't close, which means all the damages flow back down.
Trouble.
So it's a very good reason why don't sell and buy on the same day. Don't have your transaction close on the first day of the month, the last day of the month.
Good to know. And also something that's good to know is that bridge financing is always a great idea. And the reason for that, not only that, it's very stressful to have all of your belongings on a truck waiting for all of these domino deals to close. And if something does get held up, you're kind of hanging out with the movers for 24 hours.
Yes, you are. Yeah.
Anything else that's going on in your world right now?
That's sort of the main things that I'm seeing. I mean, I'm optimistic that what we're going through are just some choppy waters and not, falling off a cliff or a waterfall. But I mean, nobody has a crystal ball, but I'm certainly hoping that it's just a bit of choppy waters.
Yeah, and it is this weird time where all of those, purchases that were made kind of at the peak of the market are now starting to close. So you're seeing it more and more. But I think that maybe after this transitional period and we get to a more balanced market, you'll be able to sleep again. So,
yeah, we'll all be able to sleep again. Yeah, I mean, it's with interest rates increasing, again, I think they're going to increase a bit, but hopefully not too much.
Okay, well, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Pleasure being with everyone.